Phil is a better person than me because when he won this, there were headlines being like, this ugly guy won over One Direction. Can you believe it? If that was me, I would have committed an act of violence. I've got brass knuckles. I've got a chain. We're going to the back alley. I'm doing old-timey violence on you. Hi. Jumping in before we start the video just to let you know that I have a newsletter now. So if you want to sign up, that will be in the description below. I will be sending out directly to your inbox. If you want to sign up, it's 100% free. Personal essays, musings on pop culture, recommendations, literally just whatever I think about on a weekly-ish basis. If you want more of me directly delivered to your inbox. Mwah. Hi, hello, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Carly, and oh bitch, today we are deep diving into another kind of crevice and area of internet lore that has become increasingly relevant, and that is the fandom. Not fandom with an F, the fandom P-H-A-N-D-O-M. This is the fandom for Dan Howell and Phil Lester, or Dan is Not on Fire and The Amazing Phil. These are two, British male YouTubers who really kind of rose to prominence in that huge YouTube boom in the 2010s. I'm really excited to get into this. They've been in recent weeks very, very much, and even years, in kind of the internet news, because for a long time when they were online, they were kind of famous for having a huge young woman fan base, and a lot of them shipped Dan and Phil together. Phan was the ship name. People were convinced they were together, the kind of like Larry brain rot of being like, well, if you look at this video and they look at each other like this or they reference this, they're together. Right? But unlike Larry, they were just correct. Like this year, Dan and Phil came out and said that they've been in like a 16-year-long relationship with each other the entire time. So we're gonna walk through the lore of it. I would say this video, generally speaking, it might be fun for you to walk down memory lane if you are a big member of the fandom, but I feel like it's more for people who fell off of the wagon a bit in the 2010s and want to know what they're up to, what happened, or don't know a lot and really want context for what's happening. I feel like context for what my relationship with the fandom is. I really watched a lot of their videos in like when they were huge, because I was obsessed with YouTubers from like 2012 to 2016 was kind of my heyday. And they did a lot of collabs. This was in the era of the Brit Crew, which was like the YouTube group that had like Zoella, Alfie Days, Marcus Butler, Tanya Burr, all those people. Another one of my obsessions. And Dan and Phil weren't in the Brit Crew, but they often collabed with members of the Brit Crew. I remember they collabed a lot with Louise Pentland, Sprinkle of Glitter. Honestly, bring back YouTube usernames. I'm out here in the trenches as Uncarly, not my full name. People are just using their full name on the internet. We need to go back to a username. You need to be like, my multi-million-dollar six-figure brand is built off of the username of Sprinkle of Glitter. Yes, ma'am. So I became aware of them through that. I think they also collabed with Jacksgap, which are those two British kind of AI-looking handsome twins. So I think they collabed with them, and maybe that's how I became aware of them. But I wasn't in the fandom, I would say, necessarily, because I wasn't in on the lore, but I was a big fan of their YouTube videos, and then fell off for a bit and watched a bunch of them as context and primer for this video. They're great, honestly, just like genuinely very comforting, very good content. Nothing but love. So that's the my kind of context. The other thing I will say for kind of credit is I've got a lot of this information from the fandom wiki, the fandom Reddit, and there was a lot of now kind of defunct fandom. Whenever I say fandom, I mean the PH fandom, not the F fandom, There's a lot of defunct fandom Tumblrs that have like timelines that I've ripped information from, and it's great. So that's really it. I feel like the best way for me to walk you through the lore is literally just to walk you through an entire timeline of their careers up until now, and whenever a topic that's kind of a mainstay in the fandom lore comes up, dive into it. I feel like that's the best way to go about it. So let's do it. Oh, another thing to note, I have problems with numbers, okay? I am undiagnosed with this because my parents did not believe in dyslexia. We love. And they were right. No, and they were right. Let them cook. So I don't know what it is, but I mix up numbers in my head. I I don't really know what direction numbers go in, and I often will read numbers differently than what I say. So like I'm gonna say 2006, but what I'm meaning to say 2006, I might say 2016. So I might just misspeak. I know people fucking hate these long caveats and notices at the beginning of YouTube videos. But if you hate them, then y'all need to check in with your peers, because to be honest, if you don't put a disclaimer at the beginning of a YouTube video, every single comment will be like, you misspoke. Did you know that you misspoke? You misspoke. So you just got to put it there to be like, if I misspeak, I'm sorry. I will try to read correctly. In this video, we're going to be talking a lot about relationships, you know, Dan and Phil's relationship. And that reminds me of my relationship to fitness. Which brings me to this video's sponsor, Trainwell. Trainwell is the ultimate remote one-on-one personal training service. Trainwell provides real human accountability and expert personalization all in one app. Doesn't matter where you are on your fitness journey, Trainwell is there to help. There's no, fads here. Trainwell really wants to accompany you on a long-term fitness journey and help you reach long-term consistent health goals. You fill out their quiz once you download the app and get paired with the perfect personal trainer for your needs. When I did this, I got Jill. I love Jill. She's just such a great vibe. I had no specific physical goals, be it like cardio or building strength. I just wanted to build a more consistent practice. I had a little call with Jill. We talked about it. It was so much fun. And she created workouts that help deal with that. My favorite part of the app is actually the survey you do at the beginning of the week. Fill it out and you let them know how busy you are that week, what days you can't do, and your trainer builds your workouts around your schedule. Additionally, if you're interested, your trainer can help you build healthy eating habits, or if you're not vibing with your trainer for any reason, you can switch trainers at any time. Trainwell also has performance tracking technology that allows you to get detailed feedback from your Apple Watch or Android Watch. So if that sounds good to you, to match with the perfect trainer and get 14 days of free training, click the link below or scan the QR code on the screen now. Thank you so much, Trainwell, for sponsoring this video. Let's talk about Phan. So on March 26th, 2006, Phil uploads the first video to his YouTube account, Amazing Phil. Phil is a bit older than Dan, and Phil was definitely in the YouTube space for a bit longer than Dan, and Dan actually was a fan of Phil's YouTube, and that's what made him eventually start making his own YouTube, and they would kind of collab together, and that's kind of how they grew this joint fandom, despite the fact that they have two separate channels. So the first video is titled Phil's Video Blog. I gave this a little watch. All I can say is that old school YouTube was crazy. You would upload a 2-minute video, kind of free associating, being like, "Merp, it's pretty cold today, and I had to go to the grocery store with my parents." And then you just somehow, that would get 80,000 views. You just build a career off of that. And that's really what it is. No concepts, just vibes. During this video, Phil opens up with wishing a happy Mother's Day to his audience. He shows off what he got for his mother, a monkey in a cage, and then goes on to describe the troubles buying the monkey, his struggles with boredom in regards to his English exam, and daylight savings. In an astounding twist of fate, Phil describes his great luck to have found 10 pounds in his newly washed jeans. Next, Phil shares his excitement to go to California and possibly use slot machines. Nearing the conclusion, Phil attempts to show off a hat. However, in its absence, he shows off his lion and pig. Finally, he finishes off the video wishing a happy Easter should he not return. So that's just like a full YouTube career. We love that. No notes there. Sometime in 2007, Dan starts watching Phil's YouTube videos. These YouTube videos were uploaded he used to have a blog, and that's where a lot of like YouTubers got their start, as they started writing blogs, and they're like, oh, I'm doing a video blog, which is what vlog comes from. If you didn't know, now you know. So sometime in 2007, Dan starts watching Phil's YouTube video and, starts kind of tweeting at him. They start interacting online. June 21st, 2009, Dan and Phil become Facebook friends. Oh, and in May of 2009, this is around when Dan created his Twitter and tweeted at Phil. Phil responded. They're interacting online. So they really actually start interacting online in 2009. On October 16th, 2009, Dan uploads the first video to his YouTube account titled Dan Is Not On Fire. It is titled Hello Internet, and it's kind of an iconic video in the fandom because it is just kind of cringe. He's young when he's making it. And old school YouTube is very like, the irony-pilled affectation online is definitely a more Gen Z generational affectation. Millennials were online like being very earnest and being like, "Merp, I'm so awkward." Very that. And honestly, watching these videos, I miss it. Bring back true, unadulterated lack of fear of being cringe online, just being objectively embarrassing, because that's how you get shit done. And like, that's the human condition. Sorry. So this video is very iconic. He like slides into frame with his eye. He just acts very like random. Now they do videos oftentimes where they rewatch old videos of them. And when they react to this video, it's very like cringe for Dan. And it's just like it's a very, very funny video. 3 days later, on October 19th, 2009, Dan and Phil meet in person for the first time. They meet in Manchester Piccadilly Station. They go to Starbucks, the Apple Store, and Hilton's Sky Bar. And Dan stays with Phil while Phil's parents were away, because Phil was staying with his parents. A day later, on October 20th, 2009, they filmed the first Phil Is Not on Fire, which is a collab series between the two. It is uploaded 5 days later on October 25th. Phil Is Not on Fire, I would argue, is maybe the most popular long-running series on their channels. It is uploaded on Phil's channel. It is a collab. The name is kind of a combination between their two names. Like their YouTube names, Dan Is Not on Fire and The Amazing Phil. Phil Is Not on Fire. And it's basically a Q&A. They get people from their audience to ask them questions. They do a Q&A. They're cute together. They interact. It's fun. And they also draw on cat whiskers and a nose on their faces. So that becomes also a kind of iconic image of them. She's sleeping through this. She's sleeping through history. From watching it, you can really, I think, if you watch any of the Phil Is Not on Fires, because they continue to make it a yearly series, basically every single year they're on the internet, you can see why it's a popular series, and why shipping them became such a huge part of being in their fandom. I think they became very popular because they aren't toxically masculine. So if you're a young woman, you feel like it's way safer to be a fan of theirs and they wouldn't like disrespect you. I remember when I was younger and on YouTube, I really wasn't a big fan of any like straight man YouTube channels, because the bro-y aspects of it reminded me of kind of the bro-y aspects I think of boys like in my class. Those boys were not respectful. So I was like, why would these men be respectful? And honestly, I was making a point. When you watch Dan and Phil, they, you know, laugh with each other. They play. There's a kind of making fun of joshing, but they seem safe. They seem a lot nicer in general, right? So I think that's part of it. So it really builds this kind of like comfort viewership, and it feels like a safer place for young women to kind of exist online, right? Another aspect of it is just like they have a really fun dynamic. Dan is typically a lot more kind of deadpan, depressed, grumpy storm cloud, where Phil is very kind of innocent, sunshine, cute vibes. And that dynamic is very funny, and they are just kind of funny. Basically, from the beginning, their content is built on like fan interaction, right? This becomes a huge series on their channel, and it's just a Q&A. It's just a Q&A, but the audience feels like they can contribute to it because they're like, I'm going to submit my question for Phil Is Not on Fire. That happens at the end of October. A month later, November 25th, 2009, Phil tweets 2 photos of like a Skype call with Dan. In one of them, Dan's hand is pulling up his shirt, revealing much of his bare torso. And Phil tweets in response to this picture of Dan pulling up his shirt, woof. The photo has been deleted because it was uploaded on TwitPic. This is back in the age where you couldn't upload your own photos directly onto Twitter. So you had to use TwitPic, a separate website, to embed the photo in your tweet. The internet used to be such a fun place. So because TwitPic is now defunct, this photo is now gone. The Library of Alexandria is burning. We're losing important texts because TwitPic is gone. The tweet of Phil saying woof is still up. Dan tweets on this same night, 4.5 Skype calls are the best, which Phil retweets. So this kind of begins. Now knowing they're together, it's like, yeah, obviously, that's flirty. But I also get it, like, I am genuinely thick when it comes to stuff like this. I have had friends fully embark upon month-long flirtations with people that I assume they are just friends. I never pick up a vibe. I'm a vibeless person. I do not pick up vibes. I think everyone is friends. So I also understand the thing with shipping Phan is, although there was so much evidence, none of it was concrete. So you just kind of had to speculate. It's a little bit like how people say like Taylor Swift and Swifties, like the idea of being a Swiftie is keeping a lot of young women, young white women specifically, from joining QAnon. This is kind of that vibe as well. It's like instead of falling down like the alt-right rabbit hole, you can just compile fan proof. You know, there are worse ways to live a life. In November of 2009, Dan stays with Phil. They tweeted each other a bunch. At 2:16 a.m. on December 2nd, Dan tweets, Uma Thurman just watched me have sex, along with a photo of Uma Thurman in Phil's bedroom. So it's a picture of a Kill Bill poster gay movie, said with love, on Phil's wall and being like, Uma Thurman just watched me have sex. You're like, okay, so people could obviously argue being like, well, he just had sex in Phil's bed. But it's like now knowing we're like, okay. It is weird talking about this. I think in general, I do not like and do not support the shipping of real people. I think it's ultimately really, really harmful and can really drive people apart. And we don't know kind of what sexuality struggles people are going through and how that might affect them. I remember listening to a podcast where Lauren Haregi from Fifth Harmony, who was in a big ship in Fifth Harmony at the time, Cameron, which was between her and Camila Cabello. Lauren is a queer woman and was coming into her own sexuality and understanding that she was queer at the time, and was like, whenever I would see those things, it would make me feel like a predator. Whenever I would see photos of people being like, look at how Lauren stares at her, I would feel like I'm a predator. And so much of the fanfic at the time was like of me turning her. So there's a lot of, I think, really complicated issues with shipping real people, and I don't support it. The point of walking through this is to kind of give you context for the fandom and what they were saying at the time. So it raises a bit of an ethical concern for me. I don't want to invade someone's privacy, but the very basis of this video is in many ways invading someone's privacy. So I guess we'll find out when it goes live, whether or not this is disrespectful. So after they allegedly have sex, Dan tweets, Uma Thurman just watched me have sex. They watched Paranormal Activity, they went to see Paranormal Activity. Love. During the first quarter of 2010, Dan starts an internship at a London law firm during his gap year, and Phil gets his master's in video post-production and specialization in visual effects from York University. We kind of get a bit of a focus on this later when Dan makes videos talking about his mental health, because Dan, while pursuing law, because he wanted to be like a lawyer, didn't enjoy it and it had a negative effect on his mental health. February 2nd, 2010, Dan gets into Manchester University. Phil lives in Manchester with his parents. On February 13th, 2010, Phil films the Valentine's Day video. More on that later. We'll really break into what the Valentine's Day video specifically is. Just know that it is a private video that Phil films for Dan that is posted privately on YouTube, but like unlisted, and only Dan has the link. Okay, and it's private about their vacation. Phil sends it to Dan while Dan is on vacation in India. When Dan comes back from his trip in India, he goes and sees Phil before he goes home to his parents. So that's in February. On May 27th, all the way to June 3rd, they go on a trip to Portugal together. And then on May 28th, 2010, Amazing Dan, which is Dan's version of Phil is Not on Fire, is uploaded to his channel. In this version, Phil asks Dan questions and they don't have the cat whiskers on. I really enjoyed these videos. Did not do as well as the Phil is Not on Fire, so it was basically a defunct series before it even started. I think there was like 2 of them. And again, not doing well is relative, because every single video on all of their channels has like 8 million views. So many of us would hope, would maybe dream of getting Amazing Dan views. But, I was reading about what the contents of these videos were on the wiki, because a lot of them are removed from YouTube, and the wiki just absolutely destroys them. Is really rude and just says, this was Dan's version of Phil is Not on Fire, which did not do as well. So they only did 2 of them. The second one is currently private. That's all you need to know about that. On May 28th, so the same day that Amazing Dan is uploaded, Pin-Off 2 is uploaded. Now, Pin-Off 2, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Pin-Off 2 it's just the acronym for Phil is Not on Fire. There's simply not a fandom in the entire world that loves acronyms and speaking the acronyms phonetically like this fandom. I'm obsessed with it. I think it's very, very fun. So they just start getting referred to as Pin-Off. So Phil's Not on Fire 2, the second annual Phil is Not on Fire, is uploaded. So that's in May 2010. We got a huge gap. On August 10th, 2010, Phil moves into his own apartment in Manchester. September 16th, 2010, Dan moves to Manchester for university. September 12th, the second and final Amazing Dan video is uploaded. Series over, and this video is privated. Then the new year happens. On February 10th, 2011, Phil goes with Dan to Dan's mom's birthday party. On June 6th, 2011, Dan officially withdraws from university. On July 27th, 2011, Phil moves into their new apartment together in Manchester. And then on August 10th, 2011, Dan moves into that apartment as well. And I think it makes sense for Dan to drop out of university at this time. He was experiencing mental health problems, wasn't enjoying studying what he was studying, and they're uploading on YouTube videos consistently at this point. And this is when the partner program starts to become a realer thing in YouTube, and people can finally start making money from this. And the internet's very like an exciting thing. So this is kind of the time where you'd be like, I'm gonna be a YouTuber, I think. So they move into an apartment in in Manchester, by the way. New name for Manchester just dropped. They move into an apartment in Manchester together. August 2011, they take a trip to Italy and they attend Summer in the City. If I've learned one thing from these videos is that I did not have the fucking stamina to be a YouTuber in the 2010s. The fucking convention circuit you had to be on, dude. They would go basically every year to Summer in the City, which was the YouTube kind of like online internet convention in London, where people would meet, do kind of like networking, collabs, panels, shows, all these things. They do Playlist Live, which was the same thing in Orlando, Florida. And then they would also do VidCon, which is the same thing, I think, on a large scale in Southern California, started by the Vlogbrothers. These all happen around the same time. Playlist Live is always kind of in spring. VidCon is always kind of in like June. And then Summer in the City's in August. So they're just like, it's bus, club, another club, plane. And you just do that every year. And then they start getting these other like more mainstream opportunities as well, which is really, really great. But I just don't think I would have it in me. Like, I love being at home. You know what I mean? I love home. So like, I don't know if I could do that. So they go to Summer in the City and the Italy trip. September 7th, 2011, the Valentine's video is unprivated in a YouTube glitch, but it doesn't circulate widely. So that private Valentine's Day video that Phil made for Dan gets momentarily unprivated because of a glitch, but it doesn't go super viral or anything, or even kind of get picked up in the fandom that much. On October 17th, 2011, they start the Super Amazing Project, which is a new channel, which is owned by My Damn Channel. My Damn Channel is the same kind of weird like YouTube conglomerate that owned Grace Helbig's YouTube channel. I don't know, it doesn't exist anymore because it's a really stupid fucking business model, but it's like they own all of your IP, all your videos, you get paid a certain amount from it, but they also make money. It just doesn't really make any sense because like you can just do YouTube on your own. And this was a big thing, like Grace Helbig had to leave and start her own YouTube channel separately because My Damn Channel like owned her fucking channel, even though she had like millions of subscribers. It's kind of ironic actually that she didn't own her channel, My Damn Channel did. Anyways, they obviously still had their own YouTube channels at this point. This is just like almost like a separate show that they did that was exploring kind of conspiracy theories, alien stuff. They don't do this for very long, but this is the beginning of them again, like expanding into other avenues, making more money than God. It has to be said. I would love to see their bank accounts. We can only hope and pray to receive money in that way. Like, yes, our influencers overpaid now. Absolutely. But if I'm going to be overpaid, I would rather be overpaid exorbitantly to the point where criticism can't affect me. November 1st, 2011, Pin-Off 3 is posted. December 22nd, 2011, they post their first baking video together, How to Make Christmas Movies. This is another very popular series on their channel. They basically just bake. This is during the era of the Great British Bake Off having a chokehold on all culture, and basically still to this day. I love that. They'd basically just bake stuff. Phil claimed that at the beginning of this video, he'd never baked anything. And it's just kind of like funny because things go wrong and they're making funny comments while they're doing it. And they would do a lot of like seasonal baking challenges, you know, making Halloween cookies. I guess they'd call them biscuits because they're British. That kind of thing. I fucking love these videos. Can I communicate to you why these videos are so good? No, absolutely not. I cannot communicate to you what crack cocaine they insert into these videos, but they are just very, very funny to watch. And again, it's like they have two separate channels where they're uploading at this time, like Q&As, story times, all these different things, but then they're also still uploading on their individual channels all these collabs. They're constantly like collabing with each other, but also creating these series. Very interesting to me. On December 25th, 2011, the first Dan and Phil Christmas special airs on BBC Radio 1. I remember them doing stuff with BBC Radio 1 when I was in the mix, let's say, watching their videos as a child. I had no understanding of what the BBC Radio 1 was, really kind of like what a radio show was. And at that point I was living in America, which I would argue, unless you're living in a large city, has basically no radio presence. Like, I didn't know the disc jockeys who were doing the radio stations, because like publicly funded radio and all publicly funded things had still been like gutted in America at that point, right? Let's get into it. So I was like, why are they doing a radio show? I don't understand. Now I've moved back to Canada, and Canada has a better funded media circuit than the States, similar to the BBC. So I understand now that basically BBC Radio 1 is the British Broadcast Company's radio station, and they would basically run what became the precursor to podcasts on there. I'm saying that just because in case you were like me at 12 and was like, but the radio is where they play Katy Perry. Why are Dan and Phil on the radio? That's where Katy Perry is. That's where Katy Perry lives. That's not where Dan and Phil live. Radio talk shows have a much bigger like chokehold there. People are gonna be like, I can't believe you're explaining BBC Radio 1 to your channel. And like, I understand, but you need to understand how deeply this confused me as a child. So it's a Dan and Phil Christmas special. That's fun. That's a great idea. I'm happy the BBC is getting in with YouTubers. I think that's a great idea. The new year happens. February 14th, 2012. Phil tweets, I want someone to spend the day playing Bubble Bobble with me. I have reached level 100, but never finished it. That's Valentine's Day. Now, what's Bubble Bobble, you might ask? It's a video game. It's like a pixel video game. But, you know, he wants to play video games with his boyfriend. But people are like, oh my God, so cute, whatever. On March 17th, 2012, the first day in the life video is posted. This is another incredibly popular series on their channel. It's basically a day in the life, but it's not a classic day in the life. They'll do fun things. Sometimes it'll be them on a trip. Sometimes it'll be like, oh, it's the holiday season. We're going to do festive activities, things like that. This is when things started to get kind of real for me in the research process of this. I was f***ing around on tumblr.com, not spending a lot of time on there anymore since they got rid of porn. I was looking for Dan and Phil lore, things like that. And then I stumbled upon these Google Drive links, which is never good. I don't know why I was there, where their fandom, based on where they went in the day in the life videos, marked out their exact route, how long it would take them to walk from those places, how long they spent in those places, put maps of this on these Google Docs, basically map out the entire route. Truly Joe from You Stalker vibes. Truly Joe from You Stalker vibes. Later in their careers, Dan and Phil will kind of own up to being like, we were not careful in the way that we should have been, because like being on the internet was new. They have an incredibly rabid, incredibly engaged fan base who are young and maybe don't have a good grasp on boundaries, who are just basically doing light to medium stalking on them. And there were ways in which people would find out their address of their apartment and show up at their apartment all the time. So these day in the lives are kind of a crazy series because it's basically just allowing your stalker to track your route. Insane. Now we start the convention circuit. March 23rd to 25th, they attend Playlist Live in Orlando. This was a lot of fun. The reason you'd also go to Playlist Live is everybody would be vlogging Playlist Live, or everybody would be vlogging VidCon. So you would appear in a bunch of different people's videos. It would just be so much cross promotion. It's like the greatest crossover episode in TV history, because it's just all these YouTubers who live in different parts of the world getting together, getting drunk, or going to dinner, doing all these different things, and they're all vlogging, and you get to see all your favorite characters in different people's videos. And collabs were just like absolutely massive at this time. So it was super, super exciting. I was listening to an episode of the Internet is Dead podcast, which is a podcast that I had guested on, and they have people on from the internet to talk about their experiences. And they had Sabrina Brown, who was a big Viner who lived in Maryland, and I lived in Maryland. I was listening, and she was saying that everybody at Playlist Live was just hooking up all the time. And hearing that, the closure I was finally able to get of what was going on at Playlist Live, it's basically it's a fuck fest where every YouTuber you know is vlogging and staying at the same hotel. Playlist Live was where we found out that Zoella and Alfie Days were together, because in a separate vlog, somebody showed Zoella's screensaver on her laptop and it was them kissing. Was going down at Playlist Live, let it be said. What I really enjoyed about Dan and Phil is whenever they were in somebody else's vlog, they are actually awkward people. There was definitely a big kind of narrative at the time of being like, I'm on the internet, I'm socially awkward. And like, they weren't, they were normal people. Dan and Phil, specifically Dan, in other people's vlogs, genuinely awkward people. You gotta give it up to them. You gotta give it up to them. June 22nd to the 27th, they go to Vegas for Dan's 21st birthday. June 28th, they go to VidCon. July 11th, 2012, in response to a tweet of somebody speculating about Dan's sexuality, because still at this time, they are both in the closet and have not admitted to dating each other. But the speculation is rampant at this time. Are Dan and Phil gay? Are Dan and Phil together? What's going on? Dan responds to a tweet just saying, FYI, I like vagina. This was a huge hit to the fandom. The shippers, at least. The fan shippers are in the fucking trenches right now, getting motherfucking trench foot because of the FYI I like vagina tweet. They're trying to get the water out of the trench so they don't get trench foot, but it doesn't matter because it's raining down on them. Basically, people are like, well, we got it from the horse's mouth. Dan says that he likes vagina. And famously, every 21-year-old boy understands his sexuality intrinsically and loves to come out on the internet, so he would come out. Let that be said. So that's a big kind of part of fandom lore. On July 23rd, Dan and Phil moved to London together to do, media shit. August 17th to 19th, they do Summer in the City. Bro, the trips, my immune system could not handle it. I have a very bad, very weak immune system that I've been trying to build up again. I just get sick constantly, and traveling makes it really bad. And in the girl group, Cat's Eye, one of the members, Manal, she has a really weak immune system and has to miss out from so many things because she's sick like me. And I'm like, that would be me in a girl group. And I just don't think my immune system would be able to handle Playlist Live, Vegas trip, VidCon, FYI I like vagina tweet, Summer in the City. That's a pretty full, over the course of only like 5 or 6 months, that's a pretty full schedule. On September 12th, 2012, Pinoff 4 is posted. On October 12th, 2012, Danton posts the video Fandoms, which is about his complicated relationship with fandoms. You can see at this point now, the shipping culture is getting a lot more intense. YouTube is becoming very real, and the fans are becoming very rabid. And just a huge part of this fandom for them specifically is around the will they, won't they of their relationship. And I can't imagine being 21 and having to deal with that. I literally cannot imagine. You don't even know who you are at 21. Like that, I can't, it must be so hard. And in this video, he talks about how we think fandoms are amazing. They can achieve so many great things, but also they're really, really bad. And they're kind of like a cult, which is true. On October 31st, 2012, the Valentine's Day video is leaked again and circulates widely on Tumblr. I'm not going to go into exactly what's in the video because it is absolutely incredibly invasive. And even I have boundaries. Even freaks like me are like, well, I'm not going to circulate this. What you need to know is when it got unprivated in 2011, it had been downloaded and then it recirculated in October of 2012 on Tumblr. It's basically a video that Phil makes for Dan saying, I love you. It's Valentine's Day. I made this video because I love you. There's specific things in there, but the fandom used this as basic proof that they were together when it circulated. In response to this video leaking, Dan and Phil's explanation was that it was a prank. It was intended as an April Fool's Day prank. It's on April 1st. But it was intended as an April Fool's Day prank that then got taken out of context and they didn't upload. That is so harrowing and sad. They say in the video that they released this year where they talk about and come out and say that they've been in a relationship the whole time, how sad that video being released was for them because not only were they not out publicly, they weren't out about their relationship publicly. And it's a very private video. Like, it's a very, very private moment between you and your partner. Like, I wouldn't want that released even if I was publicly even if they were publicly in a relationship. It's such an incredible violation. And it's people treating you like your lives aren't real and you don't deserve privacy, which is a mindfuck. They also say in the video where they come out and say that they're in a relationship that people were blackmailing them prior to the release of the video. They're blackmailing them with this Valentine's Day video. That is so On November 21st, 2012, the hat fic, also known as the hamster fic, is published. I literally can't. I literally can't with this. This is a famous fan fiction in the Dan and Phil fandom. It's basically like a crack fic, like a fake fan fiction that's purposefully very, very vulgar and insane to garner likes and to be crazy. It basically was invented so people could be like, don't look up the hat fic. You don't want to see what's going on with the hat fic. And then they would look up the hat fic and be scarred for life. But it was very much like, if you know, you know, part of the fandom. It's basically involves a dead hamster mixing blood with bodily fluids and drinking it from a hat. It's disgusting. It's genuinely disgusting. I was like, oh, maybe when I make this video, like, ha ha ha, I'll read it for the video. And then I was like, I literally can't. I will be banned from YouTube. I will be banned from YouTube. I feel like everyone has an opinion that makes them like the woke friend. Like, everybody has certain things that you're like, I'm about to react exponentially to what the situation requires because of this. And for me, a lot of that is like animal abuse. Like, I'm like, so I can't talk about this fig because I'm gonna ruin the party. I get it. It's a joke, but you know. On December 24th, 2012, they end the super amazing project. Their short-lived aliens and conspiracy theory show on My Damn Channel. On December 25th, 2012, the second Dan and Phil Christmas special airs on BBC Radio 1. And on January 13th, 2013, a new year, Dan and Phil start a weekly BBC Radio 1 show. So this is when this happened. I was like, bitch, why are y'all on the radio? So aren't you happy that I explained to you what BBC Radio 1 is? On February 4th, 2013, Dan hits 1 million subscribers. Then March 22nd to 24th, Playlist Live. May 18th, 2013, they post a day in the life in New York City. July 6th, 2013, Phil hits 1 million subscribers. July 30th, 2013, Dan hits 2 million subscribers. So like within the year, like you can tell how exponential their fandoms are growing. Like it's growing so much faster. It's becoming this like crazy beast. August 1st to 3rd, 2013, they go to VidCon. August 27th, 2013, they do a day in the life in London. November 22nd, 2013, Pin-Off 5 is posted. December 22nd, 2013, Phil wins Sugarscape's Hottest Lad of 2013, and Dan comes second. And you know, Phil is a better person than me, because when he won this, there were headlines being like, this ugly guy won over One Direction. Can you believe it? The internet is such a crazy place. And like, if that was me, I would have committed an act of violence. So good for him. He seems a lot more kind of grown, balanced than I would. Because if I had a full fucking headline being like, this ugly girl won a contest, I'd be like, say it to my face. Let's go to the back alley. I've got breast knuckles. I've got a chain. We're going to the back alley. I'm doing old-timey violence on you. December 29th, 2013, Dan hits 3 million subscribers. So within 1 year, 2013, Dan hits 1 million, 2 million, and then 3 million subscribers. My brain would explode. February 19th, 2014, Dan and Phil present the YouTube live stream of the Brits, the British kind of award. Like, I feel like the Brits are the Grammys, right? Anyways, it's March, so you know what that means? Playlist Live. March 21st to 23rd, Playlist Live. June 26th to 28th, VidCon. This is a notable VidCon for Dan and Phil because they were both present in a panel called A Guide to Vlogging. And girl, put me on I want to be on a VidCon panel where I talk about vlogging. I know I don't really vlog, but I want it. During this panel, everyone was talking over Phil when Phil was trying to talk. The girls in the audience were getting pissed. And this is, you know, again, Phil is a balanced individual, because he's probably one of the more famous people on this panel, and they were all talking. It was that fucking guy. What's that guy? You know, the white guy from this era of YouTube who had dreads? You know that guy? He'd like skate around, crazy vibes. He was talking over him. Louis something. Anyways, while this is happening, Dan grabs a mic and goes, "Can Phil express an opinion? Can Phil express an opinion?" And everyone's like, yeah, he's defending his man. Very sweet moment, a very relatable moment, because I would for sure fucking do this if somebody was speaking over my partner in this way in a public forum. Every good relationship, in my opinion, is built off of somebody being incredibly sweet and then a menace. And then the menace protects the sweet one, and the sweet one comforts the menace. That's just my opinion. After Dan does this, everyone in the audience goes, "Aww." And then Dan kind of like clams up. So you can tell that the fan stuff is really kind of affecting them, where it's like everybody is invested in whether or not I'm in a relationship with someone. I literally can't imagine. August 1st to 3rd, they go to Summer in the City. August 24th, 2014, they end their weekly radio show. August 29th, 2014, Phil hits 2 million subscribers. August 1st, 2014, they start a monthly internet takeover on BBC One. So they ended their radio show, but they're just doing basically a different show. That's Internet Takeover. September 11th, 2014, Dan hits 4 million subscribers. September 12th, 2014, Dan and Phil Games, the YouTube channel, has started. This is a joint YouTube channel where they play video games on it. An incredibly popular channel. We'll get into it. On September 24th, 2014, they posted a Sims playthrough on Dan and Phil Games, their YouTube channel. A huge part of the fandom lore gets dropped where their son, Dill Halter, is born. They make their Sims character is a mix between the two of them. They call him their son, and his name is a mix between the two of their names. So now in fan fiction, when they have a child, their child is Dill Halter. They do a crazy amount of these Sims playthroughs, and they are absolutely cracking these out. I wish I had this work ethic, because that's insane. On November 6th, 2014, Pin-Off 6 is posted. The 6th annual Phil is Not on Fire is posted. On December 20th, 2014, a festive day in the life is posted where they go into Christmassy holiday things in London. You know, the new year happens. February 6th to 8th, 2015, they go to Playlist Live. February 25th, 2015, they host the Brits live stream. March 8th, 2015, Dan and Phil Games hits 1 million subscribers. I can't imagine this being my fucking life. It's so busy. On March 26th, they announced The Amazing Book is Not on Fire and The Amazing Tour is Not on Fire. This is their book. This was in the era where YouTuber books became huge. This was kind of just like a book about their lives and stuff like that, but it was like a glossy book. You know, it's more like a coffee table book than like a novel. In addition to releasing The Amazing Book is Not on Fire, they were going on tour together to do a live show all across the world called The Amazing Tour Is Not on Fire. The Amazing Book Is Not on Fire because, as you know, this fandom, no fandom in the world loves an acronym more than them and pronouncing the acronym phonetically. So the book is called Tabanoff and the tour is called Tatanoff. So when I say that, that's what I mean. On April 1st, 2015, they start Dan and Phil Crafts as an April Fool's joke. They post 4 videos on this channel. It has more subscribers than my YouTube channel. A joke. A joke to them is more than twice my livelihood, which nothing but love and light. They do crafts on this channel. They post 4 videos over the course of a couple years where they post crafts on this channel. On April 9th to the 20th, they take a trip to Japan. April 9th is also when Nick Jonas tweets Dan. He says, "Hey bud, you in London?" And Dan's like, "Oh no, we just ended up going to Japan." The randomness of this has placed Nick Jonas in fandom lore in a way you can't believe. It's kind of an inside joke in the fandom. At some point, Dan references being asked to participate in a threesome once in his life. The accepted fan lore, regardless of facts or truth, because why would you need that, is that this was a threesome between Nick Jonas and Dan and Phil. So you'll find a lot of like really funny edited images online of like the poly flag and then Dan and Phil and Nick Jonas. Just a real moment in fandom lore. I had to include it. On April 22nd, 2015, they upload A Day in the Life in Japan. From July 23rd to 25th, 2015, they go to VidCon. August 14th to the 16th, 2015, they go to Summer in the City. August 20th, Dan hits 5 million subscribers. October 4th, 2014, they upload the 2nd episode in the Sims playthrough series. They're about to start churning this shit out, and I'm gonna stop eventually, but I want you to know how actively they're uploading these Sims playthroughs. On October 8th to 15th, they do the UK leg of the Tatanoff tour. On October 10th, they upload the 3rd Sims episode. On October 12th, Phil hits 3 million subscribers. On October 13th, Tatanoff the book is published. On October 25th, Sims episode 4 is published. On November 8th, Sims episode 5 is published. On November 25th, Sims episode 6 is published. On November 29th, Pin-Off 7 is published. Phil is on Fire 7 is published. And then on December 8th, Sims episode 7 is published. On December 21st, Sims episode 8 is published. On December 22nd, Sims episode 9 is published. On December 23rd, Sims episode 10 is published. On December 24th, Sims episode 11 is published. And on December 25th, Sims episode 12 is published. Just assume they're uploading it a lot. I'm not going to say every time they upload, but they're uploading this Sims series like rent is fucking due. Okay? On February 12th, 2016, Dan tweets, "I'm off on the family holiday my mom planned for us to spend some quality time with my grandma before she gets too old to travel." On February 14th, 2016, Phil tweets from his family home, "Ahoy! No live show tonight as I'm with family, but there will be a rather romantic episode of Undertale later." The point of this in one of the timelines is that they spent Valentine's 2016 apart. And just seems like they're taking a fucking break. They were absolutely in the Sims playthrough mines, cracking away. They were at the YouTube mines creating Sims playthroughs at a rate faster than the speed of fucking light. On February 24th, 2016, they host the Brits live stream. April 22nd to 25th, they do the US and Canada leg of the Tatanoff tour. On April 25th, 2016, the last episode of their internet takeover BBC One radio show airs. June 23rd to 25th, they go to VidCon. They're still uploading Sims episodes, by the way. I'm skipping over it in my notes. I'm trying to spare you. On August 10th, 2016, Dan hits 6 million subscribers. Crazy. On August 14th, 2016, Tatanoff the Australian leg happens. August 21st, 2016, A Day in the Life in Australia is posted. On August 22nd, Dan paints his fingernails black. That just really made me laugh when I saw it. I understand it's a moment in the fandom. I'm here for it. No judgment, absolutely. Like, I was in the One Direction trenches for many, many years, so nothing is embarrassing to me. It's just really funny to see that in a timeline, complete with like huge career accomplishments. And then also he does paint his fingernails black. On October 5th, 2016, the Tatanoff tour documentary is released on YouTube Red. I watched this. It's fun. The only thing of note that I enjoyed from this documentary is that they at one point are kind of showing their like tour lodgings, and this is the bunk bed we sleep on. And you're like, girl, be real. On October 23rd, 2016, they win Best Vlogger at the BBC Radio 1 Teen Awards, which means they're only 5 away from a Brota EGOT, which is when you win a BBC Radio 1 Teen Award and then also an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony. They're only 5 away. On November 3rd, 2016, Dan and Phil Go Outside is published, which is their second book. Judging by the timeline, the turnaround on this, there's simply no way they actually wrote this book. Sorry. No shame in the game. I think actually there's no shame in using a ghostwriter is like, especially if you credit them, which, you know, they didn't. But I think if like a famous YouTuber who is doing different things is not, as long as they're not presenting it, it's like, this is a literary novel I wrote and I love writing. As long as you're not lying. You know, some people don't have time to write books. I feel like now I'm saying this and I'm gonna get ghostwriter allegations when I publish my book. I'm not using a ghostwriter, but I'm saying if I released like Carly Thorne, the introvert goes outside, and that was written by a ghostwriter, and it's like a coffee table book of pictures of me, like, I think that's fine that that's ghostwritten, especially if I would admit to it. Anyways, we're not talking about ghostwriting right now. All that's to say is their tour schedule and all the other stuff is simply too busy for them, I think, to have written this book in between writing Tabanoff and now. I'm just saying they went to the Zoella School of Creative Writing. On November 21st, 2016, they do Tatanoff in Dublin. On November 22nd, Phil wins Creator of the Year at the British Online Creator Awards, which means he's only 5 away from a Bonka Broda EGOT, which is a British Online Creator Award, a British Radio 1 Teen Award, an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony. He's only 4 away. Oh wait, I can't count. I thought EGOT had 5 things in it. Love that, love that. All that's to note is when Phil wins Creator of the Year at the Bonkas, he calls Dan up on stage with him. Cute moment. November 27th, 2016, they perform Tatanoff in Berlin. November 29th, 2016, Pinoff 8 is posted. Phil's Not on Fire 8 is posted. December 5th, 2016, they perform Tatanoff in Stockholm. On December 17th, 2017, Dan announces he stopped straightening his hair in a live show because they have very emo hair. And then eventually they're like become adults and are like, I don't want my emo hair anymore. Which if you are an adult with your emo hair, nothing but love and light to you, nothing but support for you. But they decided that Dan doesn't want to straighten his hair anymore. He's letting his hair become curly. January 30th, 2017, Phil turns 30. While on holiday with Phil's family in the Isle of Man, Dan tweets, "Happy birthday to Amazing Phil. You may be on the road to death, but the light and warmth you bring to our lives is as everlasting as the sun." Sweet. On March 2017, Shane Dawson posts a conspiracy video on his YouTube channel, which is now taken down, where he used to do these videos where it'd be like talking about 5 conspiracy theories, and the thumbnails would be like him being like, you know the ones. And in this one of the conspiracy theories was that Dan and Phil are together. The way Shane Dawson cannot keep Dan and Phil's name out of his mouth is insane. I don't want to talk about Shane Dawson any more than you want to hear about him, but he's a part of the lore. There is a point a bit later in this year where he talks about them on his podcast. And I went down the rabbit hole a bit of him talking about them, and genuinely the way he talks about them is absolutely fucking disgusting and deplorable. Not even like, I wish I had like a funny little comment. It's like he's talking about Dan's body, making fun of his body, calling them ugly, saying they don't dress like his friends, like they don't dress gay enough to be gay. Crazy, crazy shit. Horrible. Obviously, maybe not even in the top 10 of the worst things that he's done, but absolutely deplorable. On March 14th, 2017, Phil hits 1 million subscribers. On March 30th, 2017, we get the Pantsless live show, which is a famous live show in the fandom because it's a live show where Dan and Phil are both under a blanket and adjusting the blanket throughout the live stream so you can never see underneath them. So they think that they're pantsless under the blanket. Love. On April 16th, 2017, Dan paints his nails sparkly. Yup. On May 1st, 2017, Dan rebrands his channel from Dan Is Not on Fire to just his name, Dan Howell. Makes an announcement video about it. All that. On April 26th, 2017, they move into a second London apartment together. We need to talk about the apartment theory. Now, this was a huge conspiracy theory in the fandom. When they released Tabanoff, their book, they talk about their apartment, and they basically have blueprints of their apartment. Again, these guys want to be stalked. They just do not care about being stalked absolutely up their ass. They're like, hey, by the way, here are routes that we take around our apartment when we do Day in the Life. And also here's a blueprint of our apartment. In our famous book, fans started comparing this blueprint of the apartment and the images of their new apartment to images they're posting on their Instagram stories. And they have a theory that Dan and Phil have 2 separate apartments. One where they film, that's a set, and one that they live in that we don't know about. This theory just kind of sounds like, ha ha ha, oh my God, this fandom is so crazy. They were right. And I think because of the threats to their safety by their fandom, they basically bought 2 apartments, one on top of the other, and they lived in the top one, did not film there, and for a bit of distance between their work and their lives. They lived in the top apartment, and then the downstairs apartment, which also had no neighbors, so they could like scream and make a lot of noise and not disturb the neighbors, was where they filmed everything. Love. On May 5th to 27th, they go to Playlist Live. June 5th, 2017, Shane Dawson has the Psychic Twins on and asks the Psychic Twins if Dan and Phil are together, and the Psychic Twins say yes. Boo, boo, get a job, boo, stay away from them, boo. June 21st to the 24th, they go to VidCom. October 11th, 2017, Dan posts a video called Daniel in Depression, where he walks through his experiences with mental health, specifically depression. On October 17th, 2017, Dan becomes an ambassador for the UK mental health charity Young Minds. On October 19th, 2017, they released Truth Bombs, which is a party game where you ask people questions. I'm a game hater. I literally hate games. I think they fucking ruin the vibe of every party. So I got nothing to say about that. On October 30th, 2017, they release a Halloween baking video where they are conjoined in a sweater and they have to bake together. This becomes one of their most popular YouTube videos of all time in the fandom and out of the fandom. It's number 7 on the trending page of YouTube. It's objectively a fucking funny video. This is just good old-fashioned content. On November 10th, 2017, they announced the Interactive Introverts Tour. So they're back on tour, baby. Yeah. On November 16th, 2017, Dan participates with Prince William in a cyberbullying campaign. It's not really that important to the lore. I just want you to know that Prince William is in on the fan lore. On November 27th, 2017, Pin-Off 9 is released. This is an annual video series that has been going on for 9 years. That is insane! December 2017, Dan spends time with Lester's in the Isle of Man before going home to spend the holiday with his family. On January 30th, 2018, Dan tweets a picture of a birthday cake that he made for Phil's birthday that says, "Show me your birthday Phil-lussy," and then he had to explain to Phil's parents what Phil-lussy is. That is funny. April 22nd, 2018, Phil gets rid of his emo hair and replaces it with a quiff. In the arms of the angels, far away from me. May the emo hair rest. April 28th to September 21st, they're on the Interactive Introverts Tour. Just basically a full year. Imagine! I know that this is many people are like, that's my dream. I want to be a touring musician. But my immune system, I would be dead. I would genuinely be dead. Even though I'm vaccinated for the measles, I would catch measles. Like, I just would if I was on the Interactive Introvert. I can't die on the Interactive Introverts Tour from an old-timey disease. That can't be my journey. December 7th, 2018, Pin-Off 10 is posted. 10 years of Phil is on fire. On December 24th, 2018, Dan and Phil Games enters a temporary hiatus where they're no longer uploading. When this happened, I was like, heard that before. Because I'm traumatized from One Direction, where they said they were entering a temporary hiatus. And we're still here. So to me, temporary hiatus means we're done. But they do come back because they love their fans. By the way, just back on the Sims videos, they have 63 episodes of them playing The Sims. I'm doing this YouTube thing wrong. Okay, so now we're entering 2019. Now, this is the year where we have to talk about, I feel like when they announced this year that they were in a relationship, many people had a Mandela effect, where they said, I thought they already announced they were in a relationship. And they're talking about, I think, 2 events that happened. One happens in 2019, one happens, I believe, in 2023. We have to talk about them. Another thing of note that happens in 2019 is Dan goes on a hiatus. He goes on hiatus for his YouTube channel from 2019 to, I believe, 2023? 2022, where he's making minor public appearances, but not a lot, and not uploading on YouTube. Good on him. So on July 13th, 2019, Dan comes out as queer in a video titled, Basically, I'm Gay. And then on June 30th, 2019, Phil comes out as gay in a video titled Coming Out to You. I think this is partially the Mandela effect. I think when they both announced that they were both either Dan is queer, Phil is gay, and they live in a house together and have been functionally dating, but not a lot of people have thought, oh, well, them coming out as gay means that they are dating. So I think that's part of the Mandela effect. I think some people thought that them coming out as queer in some way means that they came out as together. They didn't, okay? October 19th, 2019 has also, just worth noting, it's been 10 years since they met. November 12th, 2019, they go to Japan again. Now, this is the other Mandela effect. On January 4th, 2021, Phil uploads a live stream that they did previously in December, on December 29th, 2020, and it's titled, We Have Something We Want to Tell You. And in this, they announced that they have bought a house together. I think this is the second Mandela effect. I think people were like, well, if you both have come out as gay and are have bought a house together. You are together. They do not say in this video either that they are together. So that's the other Mandela effect thing. On May 18th, 2021, Dan's book, You Will Get Through the Night, is published. This is a book published in collaboration with a neuroscience about practical ways to deal with depression. Obviously, this is something he's very, very passionate about, and I do think he wrote this, especially because there was time off, right? Like, they're not doing the freaking Tatanoff tour crazy schedule. Like, I think that this also might have been why he took time away from YouTube to dedicate more time to this. On June 18th, 2021, they move into the house they bought together. And on May 4th, 2022, Dan ends his hiatus by uploading a Why I Quit YouTube video. And he also announces his solo tour, We're All Doomed. September 10th, 2022 is the first performance of We're All Doomed. And March 3rd, 2023 is the last performance of We're All Doomed. October 15th, 2023, Dan and Phil Games' hiatus ends. I'm sorry I ever doubted you guys. On December 5th, 2023, they start a series where they react to every Phil is on fire video. These videos are really, really funny. And I think it's also why they've had a real resurgence in the last couple of years, because they have this huge library of content that is people's comfort content. Now they're reacting to it and commenting on it. And it kind of feels like you can now view this like content that you were really, really in from like a different perspective, and they're maturing with their audience. So maybe people who were 13, 14 and watching that content then wouldn't want to watch that same content now, but as an adult, they might be like, wait, I actually want to hear what they have to say about this. So that's very, very interesting. January 30th, 2024, Phil does a birthday charity live stream raising money for aid in Palestine. Absolutely huge. You know what? Dan and Phil, I knew your politics were in a good place. I'm sorry I doubted you. February 14th, 2025, they stream a recorded video of Dan's We Are All Doomed tour. This actually floored me. February 24th, 2024, Dan and Phil Beats uploads the first album, All or Nothing. Bitch, what is Dan and Phil Beats? This is just a full record they made. This is just a full, they've made several albums, and all of it is royalty-free. So it's royalty-free music. Wow. It's just, I didn't know they were doing all this stuff. On June 7th, 2022, Phil dyes his hair blonde, which the fandom calls flonde, P-H-L-O-N-D-E. June 11th, 2024, Dan's birthday charity live stream happens, again, raising aid for Palestine. On June 28th, 2024, they announced the Terrible Influence Tour, called Tit. September 4th, 2024 is the first performance of Tit. On October 19th, 2024, it's been 15 years since they met. On February 7th, 2025, the last performance of Tit happens. April 1st, 2025, they announced the Fragrancy, which is pregnancy with a PH. This is a April Fool's joke where they just announced that they're having a baby. Nothing but love. That's objectively funny. Now, on October 13th, 2025, Dan and Phil announced that they had been in a relationship for 16 years. In the video, are Dan and Phil in a relationship? The truth. I watched this video, and after doing the research for this, it genuinely made me cry. I thought it was so beautiful and amazing. They obviously have like a very really mature relationship. They talk about how they're like, we are not the pinnacle of the best relationship. You have problems, we have problems, we're just people. But I was just like, this is like not a couple I ship, because I don't ship real people. But I can't imagine finding your person 16 years ago and embarking on a journey like this together. What a beautiful thing. Amazing. I'm just so happy for them. It made me cry. I was like, this is really, really beautiful. And I can't believe we're getting a fan confirmation in 2025, but I'm not mad at it. That's the entire timeline. The only two things I really want to talk about after this are just, from an outsider's perspective, I think the really special aspects of this fandom. I think they have a huge fandom. It's similar to Taylor Swift, right? Where it's like this thing called like an outsider identity in a majority group, where you might not be a straight cis white man, but you know, Dan and Phil are queer white men. Taylor Swift is a straight white woman. So they are a majority group, let's say, but they have an outsider identity where they're weird, they're awkward, they embrace the cringe aspects of their group. They're into things that are a bit more nerdy, right? So that allows people who become fans of them to be like, I feel this way. I feel like an outsider. So they become fans of them. So I think that's part of it. And I think that that's a very, like, an important thing, especially for teenagers, to be like, to have media that makes them feel good, even if they feel weird. Right? I think a huge part that I touched on before is the fact that they embrace cringe, and that makes them a safe space. There is a difference, and I cannot explain them, between other kind of YouTubers from this generation and Dan and Phil. And I think that's why they became so many people's comfort people, especially so many women's comfort people, because they do just genuinely feel like a place where they seem genuinely pleasant and really, really nice and kind. They themselves admit to and are embarrassing on camera. So you don't have to feel this fatigue of trying to be cool and disaffected. It's like, no, you can be weird and different and still be joyful and funny and silly and all these things. So I think that's another part of it. It feels like a genuinely safe space. They also haven't shit talked or denounced their old content, even though I'm sure a lot of it represents to them like a darker time in their life when their fans had simply actually no boundaries for them. And credit where credit is due. I'm sure nobody has watched this far in the video, but I think now they have a much older fan base that really does respect their boundaries for the most part. When I'm talking about these fans, I'm talking about fans that were much, much younger, about 10 years ago, right? And I think another part of why they are so popular is like romance, especially a slow burn, keeps people hooked. It's like, not only do you get to watch these videos that might not necessarily be connected beyond being a part of these series, so you're getting fed as a fan already. You get to see these types of videos that you really, really love. And that's really exciting in and of itself. It feels like a safe space, all these things. There's also like a B plot of a possible romance. You've got a little je ne sais quoi that's keeping them going. Again, thank you to Trainwell for sponsoring this video. To match with the perfect trainer and get 14 days of free training, go to the link in my description below or scan the QR code on the screen now. So that's my video on the fandom. Thank you so much for watching. I really, really appreciate it. I'll see you soon. Bye.